Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's Business Success Series presented by Manulife. Today, we'll talk about the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. My name is Ian McLean, and I'm the President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we do live and work on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples, as we seek a renewed relationship based on a foundation of mutual understanding and respect. As participants in today's virtual event, we are coming together as one. We believe everyone is free to be their true self and receive the same respect and opportunity regardless of age, ethnicity, gender, culture, identity, sexual orientation, beliefs, or language. We hope you will join us in fostering a positive environment here today that is a safe and welcoming space for all. We know that there is more that we can do, and we are committed to listening, learning, and growing as we go. Today's session would not be possible without the continued support of our sponsors and partners. So a special thank you today to our title sponsor for the Business Success Series, Manulife, our platinum sponsor for the series, the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region, and February's presenting sponsor, KPMG. These organizations are committed to supporting our local economy and providing businesses with the resources and tools they need to thrive. I would now like to welcome Andrew Kugler, Vice President, Small Business and Group Benefits with Group Benefits Canada with Manulife, to say a few words. Andrew.
Thanks a lot, Eben. Good afternoon, folks. It's my pleasure to help introduce this session. At Manulife, we've made it a priority to develop and commit to environmental, social, and governance priorities. We believe these priorities will attract better talent as well as customers with like-minded business values and culture. We've created targets, tracking, and governance within Manulife in regards to the following ESG priorities. 1, hiring and retaining a diverse workforce. 2, creating a net zero climate change impact for the operations our employees work in. 3, investing our assets in greener portfolios. And finally, donating to local communities we do business in around the world. So in close, Manulife is committed to progress, and we are excited about the work ahead as we support the transition to net zero emissions economy and continue to drive measurable social impact across our business. I hope you enjoy the session today. Ian, back to you.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and we very much appreciate the continued support of Manulife, one of our foundational partners and sponsors that allow the Chamber to run programs like the Business Success Series and reaches so many businesses across Waterloo Region. So thank you, Andrew, to you and the Manulife team. Just before the session starts, I'd like to go over a few quick reminders. Please ensure that your microphone is muted throughout the presentation so we can reduce any background noise. If you have a tech-related question, please comment in the chat section, and a rep from the Chamber team will be back to you in just a moment. If you have a question for today's speakers, they will be gathered throughout the session. I'll do my best to try and get them to provide answers as we go through the presentation. All attendees will be sent a recording of today's presentation, and it will also be made available at the greaterkwchamber.com website. I now have the privilege of introducing today's guests, Robert Connell and Dr. Stephanie Sobek-Swant. At KPMG, Robert helps lead the tax incentives practice, which helps clients to access funding for activities like innovation, training, and accessing new markets. The main program for the TIP team is SHRED, S-R-E-D, which rewards companies for doing research and development in Canada. Robert has prepared and defended SHRED claims for clients in industries including aerospace, engineering firms, life science, manufacturing, and power generation. His experience in manufacturing, as well as chemical and electrical engineering, allows him to understand and maximize the value of R&D claimed across a wide range of fields. From this experience, Robert has developed strategies to leverage existing documentation to maximize SHRED claims in a defensible manner. He has significant experience helping clients to improve their process for documenting SHRED and uses this to help clients, often increasing the size of their claims over a period of time. Stephanie Sobek-Swant is an internationally trained biodiversity researcher with experience in leading people and administering large collaborative projects. After early experience as a research associate and project manager at Berlin's Botanic Garden and Botanical Museum. She graduated with a PhD in biodiversity and ecology from Germany's University of Göttingen. Since coming to Canada in 2008, Stephanie has held research positions at the Universities of Waterloo and Western Ontario and has taught as an assistant professor at Ryerson University. She has worked extensively in large collaborative projects, including universities, municipalities, and the community. She now lives with her daughter, Cordelia, in Kitchener. Stephanie has written editorials for the Waterloo Record Community Editorial Board for 2 years, and in recent years, she's been a member of the Aggregate Advisory Committee to the Council of Township of North Dumfries. She's also the president and vice president of the board of Waterloo, has held those positions with the Waterloo Region Nature, and a director on the board of the Ontario Land Trust Alliance. Stephanie has been in charge of Rare Charitable Research Reserve, a land trust and environmental institute in Waterloo Region, as executive director since January 2014. So thank you all for joining us today, and I'm looking forward to our chat today. Let's dig right in. Stephanie, for those that don't know, Rare is a remarkable feature of Waterloo Region, but probably not as well known as it should be. Tell us what Rare is and what it stands for.
Yes, absolutely. So as you already read in my bio, Rare is a land trust and environmental institute that really is focused on the Upper Grand River watershed. So while our main office is actually in a historic building in the village of Blair, kind of straddling the border of Kitchener and Cambridge, we really do consider ourselves a resource and an organization that serves the entirety of Waterloo Region and Wellington. And really, as a land trust, our mission and vision is to provide connected green spaces for the community to enjoy in their natural or near natural state as much as possible in perpetuity, which really means hopefully forever. And what it also means is that as a land trust and environmental institute, our ultimate goal that is behind our work is really perhaps to make the world a more sustainable place, which I think is increasingly becoming to more and more people in our community, which is a really good thing. And we do this by trying to make through our programs the environment more central and relevant in people's life through conservation, research, and education. So this may sound a bit abstract kind of when you first hear this, but what it really means is that our priority is conservation. And it means that we currently steward over 1,200 acres of natural lands that we either own or have an easement access through across Waterloo Region and Wellington. But it also means that our priority program, however, is environmental research. And it's research in ways that involves Western sciences, the arts, and different other forms of inquiries, really kind of trying to bring together different worldviews and different ways to look at the world and to find a way and answer questions of how do we want to live here together. And all this research work being done feeds back into our education program through what we call a chain of learning. And really, this it's sort of a bringing together or a working towards braiding of these different things that hopefully will enable us to see today's environmental and the related societal changes and challenges through really a multitude of different lenses. And I think, speaking of these societal issues, one of the most sort of glaring things that we currently see worldwide, but also here in Canada, is really a lack of appropriately protected lands and waters that will sustain healthy communities and a healthy planet, now for us here, but also for future generations. And most recently, many reports kind of have begun to crop up that have started to cite what they call a twin crisis of climate change and biodiversity loss. And this is really where our big vision ties into, to become a place in a very heavily urbanized area, really, where the amount of land protected for conservation and recreation appropriately is able to grow alongside development. And our future that we would like to see is one where there are enough green spaces, not just for the animals and plants to thrive, that we obviously need to survive as well, but also to make it a really livable community and a green heart in what increasingly starts to feel like a sea of gray. And we believe that Ray is positioned to really support environmental research in the region and support sustainability on conservation efforts as this economic and population growth continues to accelerate. And one thing that is important to us is that conservation, often in the very sort of historic or traditional sense, was often defined as setting a space aside, putting fences around it, and not letting anyone in. That is not the attitude we want to foster, because we very firmly believe that everyone can play a role in stewardship of land. In fact, it's very important because we're only all going to be around for so long. We're only here for a very short snapshot in time, all things considered. So we believe really, if we want to protect the ecosystems here, it can't be without humans being part of that, because we have the potential and ability to sort of enhance and be part of the environment if we can treat it in a reciprocal manner. And that's sort of the principles we really want to apply in our work. And as you mentioned earlier in your land acknowledgement, we are on the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Six Nations of the Grand River First Nations here. And I think we have a lot to learn in terms of stewardship and how to be more reciprocal with the land we're on here currently. You're muted, Ian.
I was on mute there, sorry. Two quick questions. One is situate where Rare is actually located. I don't know if you did that. I might have missed that, but just where you are in Waterloo region. And then quickly, I think there would be some that would say the Grand Valley or Grand River Conservation Authority has lands that are protected or certainly not for development. Explain how you either work with or the difference of the Grand River Conservation Authority. So where are you, and explain that connection, because I think there are some folks that have asked me about already, and I must admit it's part of the reasons I was interested in today's session is to put all of these pieces into place.
Yes, absolutely. I can speak to that. So the vast majority of our land is located sort of in the area between Kitchener, kind of the Highway 401, and going into Galt in Cambridge. So along the Grand River there, on both sides of Blair Road. However, in recent years, we've also been able to protect lands in Wellington County as well, as part of our sort of second hub, which we have termed the Eramosa River Conservation Corridor. Again, all focused on the watershed, because those are all tributaries to the Grand River and therefore very important to be remaining healthy. And we have a couple of smaller sites in Cambridge and Kitchener as well. And with regards to our relationship to other conservation organizations, such as the Grand River Conservation Authority, we see them as a conservation partner. In 2014, Chris Gosselin, who was the planner at the region at the time, made a public call to the community, really stressing that we need to protect more lands in Waterloo region through a land trust. So a lot of the local groups, including the nature clubs, for example, other advocacy groups, individuals, including developers who were interested in this work, came together to support that. And the Grand River Conservation Authority was also a party to that. My understanding currently is that they're not actively seeking to take on additional lands, at least not if they are not directly adjacent to land that they already own. But ultimately, for us, the goal is not for us to be the party who amasses the most land or anything like that. Whoever is best suited to take care of that land or take care of a specific parcel, I really think should be the party who does it, so that we can work together, really look at the map on a landscape scale and make sure we can work towards connectivity and larger spaces connected in the future.
Great. Okay. Now, Rob, I guess KPMG is involved in a great number of things around the community. Great community partner. Your partners, the firm itself is involved in everything from diversity to civic investment across the board. So why is KPMG involved with RARE? Like what makes RARE special and worth the time, effort, and financial support that you give RARE?
Sure. Well, maybe I'll answer that by first talking about why RARE is important to KPMG and then talking about why it's important to me personally. But KPMG, as you mentioned, we are committed to making our community stronger, more vibrant, better places to live and work. But we're a bunch of accountants, engineers like myself, and lawyers. We don't have the skills to do that. So we have to partner. And while we do work with many great organizations locally, RARE is one of only 5 that we consider strategic partners. And so why has KPMG chosen to invest in RARE? Several years ago, we sat down as a group in Waterloo locally to decide where we wanted to focus our efforts. And where we landed was fighting poverty and homelessness, supporting disadvantaged youth, and sustainability. And obviously, RARE is a great fit for the sustainability aspects alone. But the Every Child Outdoors, or ECO program, supports development of children. RARE's community food gardens and research efforts strike at the very roots of poverty. And so when we look at an organization whose goals mirror our own, RARE fits the bill beautifully. As a partnership, so that's what RARE brings to the table. What do we bring to the table? And so KPMG really brings 3 things: money, intellectual capital, and people. So for money, we support organizations that are well managed and fiscally responsible. We're looking for a good board of governance, strong management team, and a healthy slate of directors and advisors. And we find that at RARE. At the end of the day, we're looking for an ROI on our money, and not an ROI to KPMG, but for RARE to be able to leverage these funds to raise even more money and do more than it can be accomplished spending directly. The second thing we bring is knowledge. We sell this in 6-minute intervals, and we have a wide range of people with skills that we can bring to RARE on a pro bono basis. So we're talking about things like tax consulting, consulting on board of governance, help with government funding. And so we can apply our skills to help RARE help the community. That's win-win. Finally, it's people. We've got almost 9,000 people in Canada. Everybody donates 1 day of their time annually. That's 35 person years. It's a huge amount. And so it's great to me to be able to take a piece of that and bring that to RARE. And 3 times in the past 4 years, I think, Stephanie, we missed one due to COVID. I've been able to bring a team of about 12 people out to help plant or maintain a garden at RARE. And so just this past year, one of Stephanie's colleagues reached out and said, hey, can you guys come and plant a moon garden? And the first thing I said was yes. And the second thing I said is, what the heck is a moon garden? And then I went to my team and I said, who wants to come help on this? And I got the exact same thing. First, yes. Second, what the heck is a moon garden? So maybe just to close the loop on that for people on this call, it's a garden to attract nocturnal pollinators. So help make sure that as we develop, we're not losing the habitat that's gonna protect them. But so what we get to do is get people to come out, get their hands dirty planting and maintaining a garden. And for people who maybe work physically, this may not sound like a great escape, but when you sit down all day looking at spreadsheets and tax returns, it's fantastic to get out, get your hands dirty, and at the end of the day, see the progress that has been made. And Stephanie, I don't think it's just KPMG that feels this way. I think Toyota, you guys are one of the top hits on their volunteer day. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. If I can speak to that briefly. So even the people who do maybe get their hands dirty all day still like to come out and do it at RARE as well, because from what I've heard is that they typically have a raffle at Toyota for participation in volunteer days because they're very popular, generally speaking. And I've been told that the RARE ones are some of the most popular ones because people get to be outside and work there. So that is still a lot of excitement for even people who engage in more manual jobs, typically, to just be outside and enjoy being on the land doing the work. And they are incredibly big help usually because they're very hard workers. So a lot of stuff gets done when Toyota and when some of the other corporate groups come out. which is really something that has been lacking a bit, as you say, unfortunately, due to the pandemic restrictions. So a big shout out to our gardens coordinator, Taryn Jarvis, and her assistant, Jessica O'Connell, as well, who basically, for the most part, shipped away almost in isolation for 2 years, still producing thousands of pounds for the food bank to donate, which is a big job. But that's usually the type of work where we can really engage people, bring them out. They come to the site for the first time. They have something really meaningful and enjoyable to do outside, helping with that and really contributing to something that has an impact. But there's other ways too. One of our supporters, Fix in Toronto, for example, where it's a bit more difficult to bring people just out for a day due to the distance, sometimes we go to them as well, and we go there and help with their urban garden boxes, for example, or do sort of online presentations on pollinator gardens. And they help us too with similar support to what Rob was explaining or describing. That is not just the financial support, which of course is really important and very helpful, but they, for example, helped us with creating an interactive map that is available online where people can register their pollinator gardens for the 1,000 Gardens project, which is sort of an effort, an attempt to demonstrate, like we can link Waterloo region all the way to Toronto with sort of a network of pollinator gardens that are in people's private homes or at their businesses, for example. So overall, I think this engagement piece is really important. And for a company such as KPMG that we had a very long-standing relationship with for longer than I've been at REA, I've been there for 8 years now. I think KPMG has been around at least for 10, if not longer, and has brought in their employees as well. And a lot of them have become supporters too, and they bring groups out for our annual walk and run for REA as well, which again is a good opportunity for their staff to get to know our trails network, for example, and then they come back and visit that on their weekend with their children or bring them to camp with us.
Well, and Stephanie, put a pin in that employee engagement piece, because we're going to come back to that when we talk about ESG in a few minutes.
Yeah, and I do think it's important. I mean, the connection of KPMG bringing RARE, and I was aware of RARE, but didn't know of your connection with RARE, Rob, and I do think it's important that we do the same thing where my staff once or twice a year, we give them a day to go and do something that is important to them. Yep. There are so many not-for-profits and charities in Waterloo region that make our community tick. Many of them are chamber members, by the way. I think we've got over 300 not-for-profits and charities, of which RARE and many others that you support. I think that's one of the things, not only connecting your own staff, but through KPMG and your partners and your work with all of your private sector clients, is that they become aware of these opportunities to support community. Is that the other part of this? I mean, it's the giving back, not only as KPMG and your staff, but also letting the community know there are these worthwhile programs like RARE?
I mean, absolutely. Is when I look at the work that RARE is doing, what we've got is a world-class organization in our backyard. And the more that we can do to help spread the gospel and help get the word out about that, the better off we're all going to be, right? I guess that ties into. I'll go real quick because I think we're running behind here. But in terms of why RARE is important to me, I live here. I canoe down the Grand River, and I appreciate seeing the natural ecology as opposed to a set of condos. And I would like my kids to be able to experience that. These things don't happen without protection and preservation, right? We don't own these lands, as Stephanie mentioned. Not really. We're stewards. And we really owe it to these future generations. And so anything that we can do to help make that happen, that's great for the community at large.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on. And this is sometimes it's the chicken and egg. Are you an environmentalist that has an interest in this, or is it more less specific than that? But the bottom line always comes into play when we're talking about any issue, whether it's business, whether it's community, whether it's a not-for-profit like this. I thought what was interesting as we were getting ready for this is the triple bottom line that you kind of had mentioned as being the way to approach this, which is people, planet, and profit. So why don't you take a crack at unpacking that for us, Rob?
Sure. So I'm not an environmentalist, but my background is fuel cell technology, and I've got a healthy background, particularly in green energy. But a lot of as I was doing my master's, that came through with that is sustainability. And so 20 years ago, I'm at a number of conferences, and people are talking about this triple bottom line, and where we've said people, planet, profit. That's a bit more to help attract. But when we look at the triple bottom line, really what you're looking at is moving from just economic decisions to the three of economic, environmental, and social, and saying, how do we make the best decisions across those three? And frankly, 20 years ago, it seemed like a pipe dream. And a lot of that was based on a false assumption that how would we ever get people to act against their own economic best interest? And what we found in the interim is we've seen things like carbon taxes added. And what those do is they put a price to the environmentalism and help share that across. However, what we're really seeing, especially in the past 5 years, is we're getting companies that are shifting their vision from how do we maximize shareholder value to how do we maximize stakeholder value. And those words are similar, but the impact is substantially different. Employees are stakeholders. Customers and suppliers are stakeholders. The communities are stakeholders. And so when we shift the lens to looking to maximize that value, we see decisions going from, hey, we can offshore this product to China. And by the time we pay for shipping things across the planet, we can produce parts for $12.50 to, you know what, we can make this locally for $13 a part and employ 300 people. The first one maximizes shareholder value. The second is better for all of the stakeholders involved. And what the data is showing is that the idea that there's an economic cost to this is a little misleading, because what we're seeing is the benefit to the brand, the access to new markets, those are more than offsetting the additional cost. So if we look then at ESG, and for people who are not aware, ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. So what we're looking at here is, how do we look at making decisions move away from purely profit-driven motives and more to things like sustainability, social responsibility, and ethical business practices? And as we'll maybe discuss a little later, there are a lot of very compelling reasons why companies are making these changes.
Yeah, I think it's amazing the number of things that have been brought into focus over the last 23 months of COVID, but that triple bottom line you're talking about has become obvious with supply chains. And we don't have to go any further than PPE supply chains, of saying, is it better to pay a little bit more to have something that's in many cases developed in an environmental way, like Canadian Shield? It's produced here, it's which is more environmentally friendly, and it's creating the jobs and keeping the funds here. So I mean, we see that in industry for sure, what you've just described, that planet, people, planet, and profit, and that ESG ethos. It needs some support, certainly from government as well. Well, what are some of the things? And so drill down a bit more, because I mean, I want our business audience to be saying, I believe, like you, they might be an outdoorsman or an outdoors person. There may be reasons why they want to support this, but what is it practically that a small business can do towards getting to that ESG, that planning and compliance piece?
And that's exactly what I want to talk about, because I think there's this misconception right now that ESG is just for the big guys, that this is something that big corporations do, but small and medium businesses aren't going to get the value. So let's maybe look at what some of these are. So the E, environmental, that one's maybe a bit easier to wrap your head around, right? We're talking about improving energy efficiency, reducing waste and pollution, changing business practices away from practices that are going to encourage resource depletion or land degradation, and considering the impact of things like water shortage and deforestation, right? Taking that all into account when making decisions. The S side, right now we're looking at who are the other stakeholders. A big one is employees. What are we doing for inclusive hiring practices, worker protections and workplace standards, employee engagement, taking their opinions into how the business is going to be run, implementing mental health programs, things that are huge issues in the workforce today. A lot of things that businesses are doing anyway fall under that S bucket. right? Along with other things to support the broader community, giving back to organizations, looking at local suppliers. You mentioned PPE. I mean, it seems so long ago, but there was a period when the pandemic started that the previous US government was going to say, we're not sending any more N95 masks to Canada. So
Yeah.
what is the value of being able to manufacture and support the local industries to make sure that we are protected from the next pandemic?
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a social size. Governance is really highly intertwined with the other two. If you're complying with local regulations for environmental laws, then that's what you're doing for the G part. But it also involves ethical business practices. So one thing for KPMG, obviously we don't engage in bribery anywhere, but even in forest jurisdictions where we are at a distinct disadvantage because everybody conducts it, that's how business is done. That's not our values. We're not going to do that. We're going to forego that market. Right? Engaging in stakeholder dialogue, whether that's your employees, your communities, getting their input into how the business is run. And one for me that I've seen really change in the past 5 years is something called responsible taxation. When I first heard this, I said, what are you crazy? People pay KPMG to minimize their taxes. But what we've seen is people moving away from how do I pay the absolute minimum to I don't want to overpay, but I don't want to be overly aggressive either. Keep me off the front page. Because it is just that important that something like that goes against the values of the organization. So those are the things that fall under the G for governance.
But I think there is a growing sense that, again, as you talk about, when we think about the things that are important to us as a community, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's environment, and all three of those are front and center in this pandemic. I think we get the sense that we have to pay for the public services that we value, and that's a fine line. But I think the dialogue has changed from when it was even 2 years ago before the pandemic, and I think that's what you're describing. I think more businesses are taking good hard look at.
Well, and let's talk about what this means to chamber members. What does this mean to small and medium businesses? And as I mentioned, there's a perception that ESG is for the big guys. So 92% of the large businesses in Canada report on their sustainability initiatives. KPMG did a survey of over 500 small and medium businesses and found that only half have a sustainability goal or policy in place. And I'll leave it to you to say, is this a glass half full or glass half empty? You can look at that as a positive or as an opportunity. But I think that it's just more of a perception. And when people look and scratch beneath the surface to say, what benefit do you get from ESG? It's myriad. So number one is top line growth, right? Is investing in ESG allows companies to tap into new markets and expand into existing ones. So as an example, municipalities globally, a big example in Canada is Montreal, has added an ESG scorecard to competitive bids. So what that means is if you want to do work for the city of Montreal, they're going to make their decision based on your price, your experience, and how you score on ESG initiatives. So what that means is if you're good on ESG, it's going to help you break into that market. Or if you're already an existing company, it allows you to command a higher price. So there's immediate top line economic benefits. Cost reduction, this one's maybe is pretty easy. If you've invested in less energy, less water usage, you're going to be paying less for continued operations. But really, I think the biggest one right now, Ian, is attraction and retention of talent. As we talked about the employee experience, Stephanie, and I wonder how many people on this call right now are having trouble hiring. Everybody. It's never been more of a challenge for us. There's a war for talent. And a lot of the activities in that S bucket involve making your business somewhere that people want to come and they want to stay. So stats show that people are more likely to stay with a company when it mirrors their values. But we do need to work particularly on showing an environmental, hey, we're all about the environment. Recruiters, they need to be aware of greenwashing. People can really see through the lip service. And so for KPMG, that's where it's great to partner with Rare, where we can say, look, we're not just saying this is important to us. Come on out and help. There's a chance for people who sustainability is important to get their hands dirty, to get right out there. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, that strikes me. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but the work that our community as a whole did, whether it's municipalities, companies like KPMG to support our all-day two-way go efforts to connect Toronto and Waterloo region of saying that's good for the environment, it's good for talent, it's good for business to be connected so that we can use mass transit and not cars. It was one of those shifts that when I started the chamber 15 or 10 years ago, it was not top of mind for everyone, but it sure did quickly become one of those pieces. And I think it's because the evaluation piece changed that you're describing, which is we've got to be connected, we got to be concerned with the environment. And for all the reasons is that the people, the talent that your business at KPMG and your partners, the people that Stephanie and Rare are finding of being supportive, all have more concern for the community in a deeper sense. And I think that's really come into focus over the last 2 years.
It's a great thing to see, and you can look to counterfactuals to companies that end up on the wrong side of this. An example that comes to mind is Facebook. Facebook has been under a lot of scrutiny for being damaging to the social fabric, buried research that showed it was toxic to children, not having a great work culture. Business Insider wrote an article back in December talking about how Facebook is facing a brand tax to hire, and that they are having to pay, I mean, you're talking Silicon Valley where salaries are very high, but tens of thousands a year more for talent compared to companies like Amazon and Google, which by the way, are not known as being the most socially progressive organizations in the world. But because of how they've chosen to run their business, they are having huge costs that are associated with that.
Yeah. Listen, let's go back, Stephanie. I mean, explain if you can, how Rare fits into this triple bottom line. Like what are the pieces around the environmental, social, and governance that where you can explain to a small business who may not have heard of this before, how Rare fits into that triple bottom line?
Yeah, Ian, I think it kind of ties directly into, or what Rob just said is a good segue into this, because the region is growing quite rapidly, and we're already close to, I think now 750,000 people and projected to grow by another 35% in the next decade or so. So that's a lot. And there's increasingly more people moving in from the surrounding areas too. So if you have a small business and you have a product or service to sell, it's not just about retention of your own employees, but also how do you market your product or your service, right? So, and I feel with the next generation of corporate leaders or business owners that is coming up now, many of them have made sustainability as a priority because it's a value they themselves believe in. And it's no longer something that just, benefits them, but they really truly believe in that this is what is needed to make our communities more livable and more sustainable going forward. And if you look at the consumer base too, there is a lot of voices, particularly the next generation rising, the Gen Zs, coming up. They won't allow us to continue with the status quo and just all sit on our butts and do nothing and continue to do what we've always done, right? They are telling us quite clearly and quite loudly already that abusing the planet is simply no longer acceptable. And I think it will take all of us working together to do that heavy lifting. And that includes some people at the table that were previously excluded because things were inequitable. But it also includes people at the table who perhaps were seen as the antagonists previously too. And so I think what I'm trying to say is, how can local businesses, developers, youth, ENGOs, marginalized communities, how can we look at what is here right now and make it work? And I think people increasingly, because customers in particular, put their money where their mouth is, and they are no longer willing to, send billionaires to space with their purchases. They want to buy local. They want to support local businesses that also in turn have a positive impact in the local communities. So what we've tried to do is to also sort of map our work at Rare more explicitly with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, because that's sort of a common framework that many businesses have picked up on as sort of a guide to their corporate social responsibility work. So, so basically, there are a couple of those goals that are quite obvious if you look at RARE. For example, climate action or life on land that are quite obvious matches. But there are also some of the programs that RARE does that are maybe not quite so well known that also tie in some of these other goals. For example, the sustainable development goal number 3, health and well-being, is one that is very much on our radar. Because it's not only about protecting the ecological services provided by the biodiversity in the region, but it's also about this access to nature to help with mental and physical and emotional and spiritual health. And we have really seen this quite strikingly during the pandemic, because RARE was one of the few places where we kept our trails open throughout this entire duration, and particularly in the very beginning of the pandemic, one of the very few places where people could still go to be outside. And we didn't charge them a fee or anything, because we believe really these natural spaces should be accessible to everyone to go to free of charge. We cannot commodify that, right? Because that too is inequitable. And there are other things as well, such as quality education, for example, which is also a sustainable development goal. And we have been a training ground for a lot of young professionals who come through RARE through internships or through university classes where we partner with professors, or through our Every Child Outdoors education program as well. And they really gain this hands-on experience there that perhaps a more traditional classroom cannot provide, and that it's more difficult to find elsewhere. And I think one I would like to get back to is the sustainable development goal of zero hunger as well, because I mentioned the community gardens earlier and the food that is being grown for the food bank. And I think over the past decade, the food bank garden as RARE, particularly in collaboration with the Cambridge Self-Help Food Bank, has been able to grow, I believe, over 31,000 pounds of food that was distributed to community members in need of access to fresh produce. And again, it's a different level of health and well-being, not just the provision of the fresh food, but it's not coming just in cans. It has been lovingly grown on land that is local, without pesticides or anything along those lines. And it just kind of really rounds it out on why we need conservation and natural lands, because they feed us, they sustain us, and that is really, thankfully, increasingly important to a lot of people in our community.
Maybe just as we're getting towards the end, but I thought a lot of what you've both described, there are personal things that individuals can do to get involved with RARE. There are clearly, as Rob's highlighted, ways that corporate or business can get involved. But there is an element of this when you talk about governance and government, and there's a role for the public sector to play. Rob, what would be, and I don't know, we didn't really discuss this, so you can punt if you wish, but we have municipal elections coming up in November, and we have a provincial election in June. What are some of the things that could support this whole notion of ESG and triple bottom line that individuals or their businesses can be asking questions of political parties or those running for office in municipally? You're on mute there. There we go. 2 years into it, and I still did it, and you did it. All right,
yeah,
that's okay.
No, fair.
We don't judge here. We don't judge.
No, I was just trying to steal a few more seconds to think about the answer here. I mean, I would say through an ESG lens, one of the things that I'm most proud of living in Ontario is that we get rid of the coal plants. Is if we look at what we can do as individuals, that there are small things that we can do, but no one person could have anywhere near that impact that we decided collectively to do to reduce our carbon footprint. And so what I would say is for people is to look to your own values and make sure that those are being reflected in the candidates that we choose. I'm not a political guy. I don't have a ton of insight outside of that, yeah. I'm afraid, Ian.
No, well, I do think it's important, and maybe Stephanie, same thing for you. Are there things that, like you talked about the education component? I can well imagine, and I think there's less of utilizing facilities like Rare to partner with, as an example, school kids in either high school or younger grades. There just it becomes there's funding issues. There's the practical of how you get a great number of students to go through. But I mean, getting students to touch and feel and understand what's there is critically important. Or, I mean, would that be one of the things where we say, look, that would be an important public policy piece that could be that could drive a better understanding of the need for things like Rare and what it means to our collective future?
Yeah, I think that would absolutely be beneficial. Like the more our education system can be supported in seeking alternative means of education as well, that is not just happening in the traditional classroom, I think that would be extremely beneficial in bringing together the community and bringing together the kids too, who take that message into their homes and to their parents and grandparents and to the different generations. And there's still, in many ways, still a bit of a generational divide, particularly if you look at the boomers and the Gen Zs and us kind of Gen Xers kind of in the middle trying to navigate and moderate that what is often sort of on different ends of the spectrum of opinions, right? But if you would ask me what I would be looking for, and unfortunately I can't vote because I'm not a citizen, but really look at what is the climate change strategies that are being put out there, because this is our biggest emergency. There's no doubt about that, right? It is as Greta Thunberg says, the house really is on fire. And I think we really need to be drilling down into what is provided here by our representatives that is meaningful working towards combating climate change.
Okay. So we're last question. We're going to wrap up in just a few minutes. We're back on time here. So maybe just some final thoughts, and we'll start with Stephanie. What if, as sort of in conclusion, what do you want people to take away from this session? How do you want them to think about the issues that we've discussed, and how can they get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's important really is, if you think about sustainability for yourself or your business, think about what part does the human species play in this, and how can you include the human engagement in that, and what can you do to work towards more interconnected relationships, again, that you have with land and being outside and engaging with the environment, because I think that's our only hope. We need to gain a better understanding and make that more tangible again, and understand our own part as part of the system. So really, we invite everyone, corporately, individually, to come out and visit Rare Properties or other trails in the region. Be out there, see what's right, in your front yard. Basically, you don't have to go far. There's a lot of places that you can even reach with public transportation, where you can use active transportation, such as cycling, to get to, and make use of that, enjoy that, and see what you can learn about yourself in that context. And we're happy to speak to you at any time. I mean, check out our website. We're in the chamber registry as well. And on our website, raresites.org, you can certainly learn more about the nature programs that we offer for kids, for example, day camps during March break, which is coming up in summer as well. We also have a nature school program now that is sort of a school alternative program where kids, instead of going to school for a day a week, they come out to Rare. And we're absolutely happy for you to just see what's there.
Say that website one more time.
It's www.raresites, that's SITES.org.
Okay, RARESITES.org. That's the place to get that. All right, last few minutes to you, Rob. What's the takeaway? You've done a pretty good job. If you're boiling it down in your last 2 minutes, where would you take that?
Okay, so let's circle back on what this means to small business and for small businesses that say, hey, you know what? I see this is something I should get involved in. What do I do from here? ESG, if you look across all the different categories that you could look to play in the space, there's around 40 different factors to consider. And something to realize is they don't apply to all companies and all industries equally, right? Is if a steel manufacturer wants to go carbon neutral, that's a much larger undertaking than a startup that has 6 people and laptops. So what we encourage businesses to do is look for areas, what we call double materiality. So the idea there is you might have an initiative that's going to have a huge impact on the community, but not much for the value of your business. And there might be others that are great for the business, but are not doing much for the community. So you want to focus your efforts on the ones that are going to have high impact on engaging suppliers or improving energy efficiency and have an impact on the enterprise value as well. One last thing I wanted to mention, Andrew talked about Manulife investing in sustainable funds. They're absolutely exploding right now. In Canada, investment doubled in 2021 from 17 to 34 billion. So there's a lot of private money going into it. There's a ton of government money, companies that are looking to make themselves more sustainable, improve energy efficiency. There are grants and interest-free loans to make that happen. So there's a lot of support for small businesses to help get involved in ESG.
Listen, been a fascinating discussion. So want to thank you, Rob and Stephanie, for joining us today. That does bring us to the end of today's session. So thank you once again to our title sponsor of the series, Manulife, our platinum sponsor for the series, the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region, and February sponsor, KPMG. And finally, to all of you for joining us today. As a reminder, we do host a new Business Success Series session every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Join us next week for Promoting Workplace Mental Health in Challenging Times. Allison Demey, Director at CMHA, Waterloo Wellington, and Dr. Carl Loco, clinical social worker and psychotherapist, will be joining us and sharing information and strategies on coping during these challenging times. To find out other upcoming events, please visit us at greaterkwchamber.com. Please share this series with your friends and colleagues and join us next Wednesday or every Wednesday for another edition of the Greater KW Chambers Business Success Series brought to you by Manulife. Because if it's Wednesday, it's the Business Success Series. Thanks so much, gang. Appreciate it. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you,
Great job, Rob.
Thank you.